My name is Avery Lockhart, and 3 days after I gave birth to twins, my mother-in-law walked into my hospital room, dropped divorce papers beside my newborns, and said, "Take $20 million and sign it. I only want the kids." Behind her stood my husband's mistress, Maris Bellwood, holding a designer baby blanket like she had already been promoted from secret affair to replacement mother. Cordelia Ashford called me exhausted, unstable, and no longer useful to her family. My husband Bennett stood by the door and said nothing. I did not cry. I did not beg. I only glanced at the flowers near my bed, where one tiny red light was still blinking. Welcome back to Pure Drama Stories, where betrayal does not always arrive with shouting. Sometimes it walks in wearing pearls, carrying legal papers, and smiling like motherhood can be bought. Tonight's story enters family betrayal, public humiliation, hidden proof, and the kind of revenge that waits until cruelty speaks clearly enough to convict itself. To understand why I stayed so calm while Cordelia tried to buy my children in a hospital room, I need to take you back to the weeks before she made the sentence that ruined her entire family. I married Bennett Ashford because I believed, foolishly and completely, that quiet men were honest men. He had that polished old money softness people mistake for kindness. He opened doors, remembered my coffee order, spoke gently in restaurants, and always looked wounded when anyone accused him of being cold. His family owned Ashford Meridian, a private investment firm with offices in Boston, Palm Beach, and Dallas. Their name was engraved on hospital wings, charity boards, scholarship plaques, and every other surface wealthy people use to convince the world they have clean hands. Cordelia Ashford never liked me. She did not hate me loudly at first. That would have been too common for her. She disliked me with etiquette. She smiled just enough to avoid being called cruel. She complimented my dress by asking whether it was vintage. She referred to my public school background as refreshingly uncurated. She once told me during Thanksgiving dessert that women from ordinary families often had stronger survival instincts. Bennett squeezed my knee under the table that night, as if that small pressure could replace a spine. For a while, I explained him to myself. That is what women do when love has not yet become evidence. We turn silence into stress, absence into pressure, cowardice into complication. Bennett was busy. Bennett was tired. Bennett was trapped between two women who wanted different things from him. I told myself those lies with such patience that I almost started believing them. Then I got pregnant. Cordelia's entire attitude changed the day the doctors said there were 2 heartbeats. She did not hug me. She did not cry. She looked at the ultrasound screen with the sharp concentration of someone studying a contract. 2 heirs, 2 names, 2 tiny bodies she could fold into the Ashford legacy like ribbon into a gift box. From that day forward, she began visiting too often, asking too many questions, making too many decisions that no one had given her the right to make. She chose nursery colors before I did. She interviewed nannies before my 2nd trimester ended. She sent Bennett links to elite preschools for children who were still the size of peaches. At first, I thought she was overbearing in that wealthy grandmother way, irritating but survivable. Then she started saying things that made my skin go cold. Ashford children need Ashford structure. New mothers are emotional. It is better to establish authority early. Babies bond with whoever is consistent, Avery. Biology is not everything. Those words stayed with me, not because they were dramatic, but because they were rehearsed. Cruelty has a different temperature when someone has practiced it before saying it out loud. I was 7 months pregnant when I saw Maris Bellwood's name on Bennett's phone. It was after midnight. Bennett was asleep beside me, one arm thrown over his face, breathing like a man with nothing to confess. His phone lit up on the nightstand. I was not looking for betrayal. That is important. I was reaching for water because one of the twins had decided my ribs were a staircase. The message preview appeared before I could look away. Maris, your mother said not to worry. Once the babies are here, Avery won't be a problem. For a second, the room became perfectly still. Not quiet, still. The kind of stillness that makes every object look too sharp. The glass on the table, the shadow under the door, Bennett's wedding ring catching moonlight like a joke. I picked up the phone with hands that did not feel like mine. His password was still our anniversary, because men like Bennett often mistake arrogance for safety. I opened the thread. There were months of messages. Not only romance, not only hotel rooms and private dinners and photos taken from angles no wife should ever see. There were conversations about me, about the babies, about timing. Maris wrote, I can handle newborns. I told Cordelia I'm ready. Bennett replied, my mother wants everything clean. No scandal. Maris wrote, and Avery? Bennett replied, she'll take the money. She doesn't have the stomach to fight us. I sat in bed beside my sleeping husband and read the blueprint of my own erasure. There are moments when grief does not come as tears. It comes as organization. Something inside me closed one door and opened another. I took screenshots. I forwarded messages to a private email. I photographed hotel receipts, wire transfers, calendar invites, and one particularly disgusting note from Cordelia to Bennett that said, do not let sentiment interfere with succession. Succession. That was the word that told me this was bigger than an affair. The next morning, I called Harper Lane. Harper and I had met years earlier, long before Bennett, when we were both working entry-level research jobs in Chicago and living on coffee, ambition, and cheap takeout. She had become a licensed private investigator after leaving corporate compliance, which meant she knew how to find what people tried to bury. I did not dramatize when I called her. I did not say my life was ending. I simply said, I need you to look into my husband, his mother, and a woman named Maris Bellwood. Harper was silent for maybe 2 seconds. Then she said, send me everything, and Avery, do not confront him. That was the first smart instruction anyone gave me. For the next 6 weeks, I lived inside my own marriage like a witness under protection. I smiled at Bennett over breakfast while Harper documented his hotel visits. I let Cordelia touch my stomach while my lawyer requested copies of trust documents. I listened to Maris call herself patient in messages, while I learned that patience was the only weapon she did not expect me to have. Julian Voss entered my life through a referral from Harper. He was not the kind of lawyer who barked into phones or slapped tables. He wore plain navy suits, spoke softly, and made other attorneys nervous by asking one quiet question at a time. When I showed him the messages, he did not look shocked. Good lawyers rarely do. Shock wastes time. He read everything twice. Then he leaned back and said, they are not just planning a divorce. They are planning a custody capture. The phrase made my throat tighten. Julian explained what Harper had already begun to uncover. Bennett's grandfather, Warren Ashford, had created a family trust years ago after nearly losing the company to Bennett's father's gambling and bad investments. The trust gave Bennett access to a larger controlling interest only after he produced legitimate heirs and established them within the Ashford household. It was old-fashioned, ugly, and dressed up in legal language about family continuity. Cordelia did not want grandchildren. She wanted keys. My babies were not babies to her. They were access points. That night, I stood in the nursery Cordelia had tried to decorate and looked at the 2 cribs I had chosen myself after canceling every order she made without asking me. I placed one hand on my stomach and felt one twin move, then the other. For the first time since discovering the affair, I cried. Not because I was weak, because I had finally understood the shape of the threat. A woman can survive a husband's betrayal. She can survive humiliation, gossip, even abandonment. But when someone decides her children are assets, not souls, something older than fear wakes up inside her. Julian moved quickly after that. He prepared medical directives, emergency custody petitions, affidavits, evidence logs, a plan for safe relocation after delivery if Bennett or Cordelia attempted pressure while I was recovering. Harper arranged a small recording device disguised inside a flower arrangement, legal under the circumstances because it was placed in my private hospital room with my consent. I hated needing it. I hated that motherhood, for me, required surveillance before lullabies. But I used it anyway. Bennett noticed something had changed in me near the end. He studied me across dinner one night and asked if I was okay. The question was almost funny. Not because it was caring, but because he looked irritated by the possibility that my pain might inconvenience him. "I'm tired," I said. He nodded with relief. "That's normal." Normal. That word carried so much cowardice in his mouth. Cordelia threw a pre-birth luncheon 2 weeks before my due date, though I specifically told her I did not want one. She invited women from her club, wives of board members, donors, people who spoke in soft voices and measured cruelty in teaspoons. Maris was there too, introduced as a family friend. She wore pale blue and looked at my stomach with the proprietary warmth of someone admiring furniture she had already purchased. During dessert, Cordelia raised a glass and said, "To the next generation of Ashfords. May they inherit strength, discipline, and a proper sense of belonging." Everyone clapped. Bennett smiled. Maris lowered her eyes like a bride pretending not to be noticed. I smiled too. It is strange, the things people miss when they are busy underestimating you. Cordelia saw my swollen ankles, my tired face, the way I leaned back in my chair because breathing had become labor. She did not see the woman memorizing every witness, every phrase, every glance exchanged between her son and his mistress. She did not know that every insult she wrapped in silk was being added to a file. The twins came early. It was raining the night my water broke, a hard Boston rain that made the windows shine black. Bennett drove too fast and spoke too little. At the hospital, everything became fluorescent, urgent, and blurred at the edges. One heartbeat dipped, then the other stabilized. Doctors moved around me with calm speed. Bennett called Cordelia before he called my mother's old friend, who had raised me after my parents died. I remember that detail because pain makes certain betrayals glow. Noah was born first, furious and red-faced, screaming like he had objections to the entire world. Blair came 4 minutes later, quieter, smaller, his tiny hand opening and closing against the nurse's glove. I did not know love could arrive with that much violence. It tore through me. It remade the room. Bennett cried when he saw them. Real tears, I think. That almost hurt worse, because somewhere inside him was a man capable of feeling, just not capable of loyalty. Cordelia arrived with white roses and a photographer. I had been out of surgery for less than a day. "Not now," I whispered. She ignored me and adjusted the blanket near Noah's chin. The first Ashford portrait matters. I looked at Bennett. He looked away. That was when the last soft part of me stopped waiting for him. For 3 days, I recovered under watchful eyes. Nurses came and went. Bennett pretended to be attentive when staff entered, then spent hours on his phone. Cordelia hovered, making comments about feeding schedules, sleep habits, and how fragile I seemed. Maris sent Bennett a message that Harper later captured through synced records. Has she signed yet? On the 3rd afternoon, Harper visited with flowers. She kissed my forehead, placed the arrangement near the bed, and squeezed my hand once. Hidden among the white lilies was the tiny camera. I did not look at it again until Cordelia walked in. She arrived at 4:17 p.m. I remember because the wall clock was above Bennett's shoulder, and I kept my eyes on it the way drowning people keep their eyes on shore. Cordelia wore cream wool and pearls. Maris stood behind her in a fitted gray dress, carrying that absurd designer baby blanket. Bennett entered last. His face was pale, but not ashamed, more like inconvenienced. Cordelia did not ask how I felt. She did not look at the stitches pulling pain through my body. She did not lower her voice for the sleeping babies. She placed a thick folder on my tray. "Take $20 million and sign it," she said. "I only want the kids." There it was, the sentence. Clean, cruel, and perfect. I let the silence stretch because silence makes arrogant people nervous, and nervous, arrogant people tend to keep talking. Cordelia glanced at Bennett, then back at me. "This does not need to become unpleasant. You are exhausted, Avery. Unstable, frankly. No one would blame you for admitting this life is too much for you." Maris stepped closer to the bassinets. "They'll be loved," she said softly, as if she were comforting me instead of robbing me. I looked at her hand near Noah's blanket. "Do not touch my son." Her face tightened. Bennett finally spoke. "Avery, don't make this harder." That was all he had for me. Not an apology, not guilt, not even the dignity of honesty. Just a request that I make my own destruction convenient. Cordelia slid a pen toward me. "You will leave with enough money to start over. More than enough. Many women would be grateful." I picked up the pen. Inside me, something was screaming. My body hurt. My milk had come in. I had not slept longer than 40 minutes at a time. My sons were 3 days old, and the people who should have protected this room had turned it into a negotiation table. But my hand was steady, because rage without timing is just noise, and I was done making noise for people who only respected documents. I signed where Julian had told me to sign. Not because the agreement would stand. It would not. Not under those circumstances, not with that pressure, not with that recording, not with Bennett's affair and Cordelia's trust motive woven through every page. I signed because Cordelia needed to believe she had won. People like her only step fully into a trap when they think they built it themselves. Cordelia exhaled. Maris smiled. Bennett looked relieved. That relief was the ugliest thing in the room. Cordelia gathered the papers and said, "You are making the right choice." I looked at her then. Really looked. "No," I said quietly. "You are." She misunderstood that too. At 11:42 that night, I left the hospital through a private discharge arranged by Julian, approved by my physician, and assisted by a nurse who had heard enough that afternoon to stop pretending neutrality was kindness. Harper drove us in a black SUV with tinted windows. Noah slept against my chest. Blair was tucked beside him. Every bump in the road sent pain through my abdomen, but I did not make a sound. The city passed in wet gold and black outside the window. Behind us, Bennett was asleep in the family suite, probably thinking the mess of me had been solved. Harper glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "You okay?" I looked down at my sons. Noah's mouth moved in his sleep. Blair's hand rested against his brother's sleeve. "No," I said, "but I'm finished being useful to them." We arrived at a private recovery residence outside the city before dawn. It was not glamorous. It was safe. There were nurses, locked entries, medical staff, and a room with soft lamps where no one named Ashford could enter. Julian was already there with a laptop open and 3 cups of coffee no one had touched. "The emergency petition is filed," he said. "The recording is preserved. The physician's statement is attached. Harper's report is attached. Bennett's messages are attached. The funds are flagged." I sat carefully, one baby on each side of me. "And the divorce papers?" Julian's mouth barely moved. "A gift." By morning, Cordelia realized something had gone terribly wrong. She discovered it in stages, which was kinder than she deserved and more satisfying than I expected. First, the hospital told her I had been lawfully discharged and that my location was private. She threatened administrators. They transferred her to legal. Second, Bennett called my phone 17 times. I did not answer. He texted, "Where are my sons?" Then, "This is insane." Then, "My mother is furious." That last message told me everything about the order of his concern.
Third, Cordelia's attorney informed her that the agreement she thought she held like a trophy had become evidence in an emergency custody matter. Her own demand, her own voice, her own statement that she wanted the children in exchange for $20 million was now at the center of a legal filing. Fourth, the $20 million transfer she had arranged through a family-controlled account was frozen pending review. And fifth, the board of Ashford Meridian received notice that a shareholder inquiry had been initiated regarding misuse of corporate funds, undisclosed conflicts, and improper transfers connected to Bennett Ashford and Cordelia Ashford. That was the part she did not see coming. Cordelia had spent years assuming I knew nothing about money because I did not worship it in public. She thought because I wore simple clothes and spoke softly at dinners, I had no understanding of ownership. She forgot that quiet people can read. She forgot that my late grandfather had been a patient, careful man who invested through boring little entities with names nobody remembered until paperwork made them matter. Years before I met Bennett, my grandfather had invested in a private fund that later acquired a minority position in Ashford Meridian. During a liquidity crisis, the family kept very quiet. When he died, that interest passed into a trust for me. I did not control the company, not at first. But I had rights. Rights to records, rights to questions, rights to make certain people very uncomfortable once they gave me a reason. And Cordelia had given me a reason while standing beside my hospital bed. The temporary custody hearing happened 4 days later. I wore a loose black dress because nothing else fit comfortably, and because black felt honest. My body still felt borrowed from a battlefield. I moved carefully. I sat slowly. I had 2 nurses waiting outside with the twins because I refused to let Bennett parade them in court like property. Cordelia arrived dressed like a donor plaque. Bennett wore a navy suit and a wounded expression. Maris should not have come, but arrogance often ruins strategy. She sat behind Bennett with her hair pinned back, trying to look supportive and maternal. She looked like a woman auditioning for sympathy in the wrong room. Their attorney argued that I was emotionally unstable, that I had fled, that Bennett was a devoted father, that the Ashford home could provide structure, security, and continuity. He used the word continuity 3 times. Rich families love that word. It makes control sound like tradition. Julian stood with one button of his jacket closed and asked for the recording to be played. Cordelia's voice filled the room. "Take $20 million and sign it. I only want the kids." No one moved. Then came her next lines. "You are exhausted, Avery. Unstable, frankly." Then Maris. "They'll be loved." Then Bennett. "Avery, don't make this harder." I watched Bennett hear himself. That was the first time he looked truly afraid. Not guilty. Afraid. Guilt requires moral architecture. Fear only requires consequence. Julian did not attack. He simply placed each fact where it belonged. My medical condition, the timing, the affair, the mistress present in my hospital room, the demand for the children, the money, the trust motive, the messages, Cordelia's preparation of a separate nursery, Bennett's communication with Maris about removing me after birth. The judge looked at Bennett over her glasses and asked, "You allowed this conversation to happen 3 days after your wife delivered twins?" Bennett swallowed. "I thought it was better to resolve things calmly." Calmly, the judge repeated. One word can become a blade when the right person holds it. Temporary sole custody remained with me. Bennett received limited supervised visitation pending further review. Cordelia was barred from contact unless approved by the court. Maris was not permitted near the children. Cordelia's face did not collapse. Women like her train their faces the way soldiers train their hands. But I saw the flicker, the disbelief, the private outrage that the world had not obeyed her. Outside the courtroom, she stepped close enough that her perfume touched the air around me. "You have no idea what you have started," she said. I looked at her pearls, then at her eyes. "I know exactly what you started." The company inquiry became public 2 weeks later. Not because I leaked it. I did not have to. Investors smell blood faster than journalists. A routine shareholder demand became a board review. A board review became an internal audit. An internal audit became a series of urgent meetings behind glass doors where men who had smiled at Cordelia's charity luncheons started pretending they had always been concerned. The audit found personal expenses charged through corporate accounts, travel for Bennett and Maris hidden under client development, jewelry categorized as executive gifting, payments to a crisis consultant before the twins were even born, retainers to family attorneys for custody strategy billed through entities connected to Ashford Meridian. Cordelia had moved through life believing elegance made corruption invisible. It did not. It only made the receipts more expensive. Maris lost her job first. She had been working for a boutique foundation funded by Ashford donors, which sounded noble until people realized half her title existed because Cordelia had arranged it. When the affair became part of the custody record and the expense trail linked her to Bennett's corporate spending, the foundation accepted her resignation. That is the polite word rich organizations use when they push someone out and hope the door closes quietly. She sent me one message after that. "You destroyed my life." I stared at it while Blair slept against my shoulder, and Noah made small, impatient noises in his bassinet. I typed nothing, deleted nothing, forwarded it to Julian. There was a time when I might have wanted to answer her. I might have told her she helped plan the theft of newborn children from a recovering mother. I might have asked what kind of woman stands in a maternity room and imagines herself entitled to another woman's babies. But revenge had taught me something quieter than satisfaction. Some people do not deserve your explanation. They deserve a timestamp. Bennett came to his first supervised visit wearing a sweater I had bought him 2 Christmases earlier. That almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because manipulation is often sentimental when it runs out of power. He cried when he saw the twins. Again, real tears. Again, too late. "Avery," he said, while the supervisor pretended not to listen too closely. "My mother pushed too hard. I should have stopped her." "Yes," I said. "I was scared." "I know." He looked relieved, as if understanding meant forgiveness. I adjusted Noah's blanket. "You were scared of your mother. You were scared of scandal. You were scared of losing money. You were never scared of losing me until I became inconvenient to lose." His face changed then. There it was, the little flash of resentment men show when your pain becomes too articulate. "I loved you," he said. "No," I answered. "You enjoyed being loved by me." He had no response to that. Most selfish people do not mind being cruel. They mind being accurately described. Cordelia fought harder. She hired a public relations team. She tried to frame me as a vindictive ex-wife, weaponizing childbirth. Anonymous stories appeared online claiming I had emotional episodes during pregnancy. Someone suggested I had married Bennett for money. Someone else hinted that my background was not suited to the Ashford lifestyle. It was all so predictable that Julian did not even look annoyed. He looked bored, which was worse for them. Harper traced the stories to a consultant Cordelia had used before. The same consultant appeared in the corporate expense review. Another thread, another knot, another piece of Cordelia's own rope. The final custody hearing took place 3 months after the hospital room. By then, I could stand without pain. I could sleep for 3 hours if the universe was feeling merciful. I had learned the difference between Noah's hungry cry and Blair's offended cry. I had learned how to sign legal documents with one hand while holding a bottle with the other. Motherhood did not make me soft in the way Cordelia expected. It made me exact.
The courtroom was full that day, not with spectators, but with consequences. Lawyers, a guardian ad litem, corporate counsel sitting quietly in the back because the family case and the company scandal had started feeding each other. Bennett looked thinner. Maris was absent. Cordelia wore charcoal, no pearls. That told me she was scared. Julian called Harper first. She walked through the timeline with professional calm, the affair, the messages, the trust, the preparations, the hospital recording, the smear campaign. She did not embellish, she did not need to. Facts have their own rhythm when arranged correctly. Then my doctor testified about my condition 3 days postpartum, the risks of stress, the vulnerability of recovery, the inappropriate nature of pressuring a patient under those circumstances. The nurse testified too. She remembered Cordelia's tone. She remembered Maris standing near the bassinets. She remembered Bennett not intervening. When Cordelia took the stand, she tried to become grandmotherly. I was concerned for the children, she said. Julian approached with 1 page in his hand. Concerned enough to offer their mother $20 million to leave them? Cordelia's jaw tightened. That is not what I meant, but that is what you said. I was simplifying a complicated family matter. Julian nodded as if that answer interested him. Mrs. Ashford, in your experience, is it common to simplify family matters by bringing your son's mistress into the hospital room of his recovering wife? A sound moved through the courtroom, not laughter, something sharper, the collapse of a performance. Cordelia looked at the judge, then at Bennett, then back at Julian. For the first time since I had known her, she had nowhere elegant to stand. Julian continued. Did you or did you not prepare a nursery in your residence before Mrs. Lockhart gave birth? For my grandchildren. Did you or did you not discuss with your son the importance of establishing the children in the Ashford household due to provisions in Warren Ashford's trust? Her attorney objected. The judge allowed a narrower question. Julian rephrased with surgical patience. Cordelia answered badly, then worse, then not at all. Bennett's turn was quieter. He admitted the affair. He admitted Maris had been present. He claimed he had not understood the legal implications of the $20 million offer. That was Bennett at his most honest, admitting ignorance only when malice became expensive. The judge issued her ruling near the end of the day. Primary custody remained with me. Bennett's visitation would continue under supervision, subject to review only after parenting evaluations and compliance with court directives. Cordelia was barred from unsupervised access indefinitely. Any attempt to interfere, contact the children through third parties, or continue public harassment would result in sanctions. The words were legal, measured, bloodless. They were also devastating. Cordelia stared straight ahead. Bennett lowered his face into his hands. Across the aisle, I sat still. I had imagined that victory might feel like fire. It did not. It felt like oxygen returning slowly to a room that had been sealed for too long. The board removed Bennett from his executive role the following Monday. They called it a leave of absence at first, then a transition, then a governance decision. Wealth has many soft names for disgrace. But everyone knew. The scandal had endangered investor confidence, and investor confidence was the one child Cordelia had always loved more than Bennett. Ashford Meridian restructured its leadership. Cordelia resigned from 2 charity boards. Her name disappeared from an upcoming hospital gala. The same women who had applauded her toast at my luncheon began sending me careful messages about strength and privacy and thinking of you. I did not answer most of them. People who clap for your humiliation rarely deserve seats at your recovery. The $20 million remained frozen until settlement discussions reopened under court supervision. In the end, every cent went into an irrevocable trust for Noah and Blair, controlled by independent trustees with strict protections. Cordelia could not touch it. Bennett could not borrow against it. Maris could not benefit from it. The money she had used as bait became a wall around my sons. That was the part I loved most. Not because of the amount. Money had never been the wound. The wound was the belief behind it, that a mother in pain could be priced, pressured, and replaced. Cordelia had measured my value in dollars and assumed I would do the same with my children. Her mistake was not underestimating my intelligence. It was underestimating my love. 6 months after the twins were born, I moved into a house near the coast in Maine. Nothing enormous, nothing designed to impress strangers. White walls, weathered floors, a kitchen that caught morning light, and a nursery with 2 cribs by the window. Harper visited often. Julian sent fewer emails. The world slowly stopped feeling like a courtroom. One evening, Bennett sent a message. "Can we talk like adults? I want us to move forward." I looked at those words for a long time. Move forward. Another soft phrase people use when they want you to step over the damage they caused without making them look at it. Noah was asleep against my chest. Blair was in the crib, fighting sleep with the offended dignity of a tiny king. Outside, the ocean moved in the dark, steady and indifferent. I deleted the message. Then I opened the drawer beside my bed and took out a copy of the hospital transcript. I had not looked at it in weeks. Cordelia's sentence sat there in black ink, stripped of perfume, pearls, and power. Take $20 million and sign it. I only want the kids. For months, people had asked me how I stayed calm. Reporters, lawyers, even Harper once, late at night over cold coffee. The truth was not noble. I stayed calm because if I had screamed, they would have called me hysterical. If I had cried, they would have called me unstable. If I had fought in that hospital room, they would have used my pain as proof that I was exactly what they said I was. So I gave them the version of me they expected. Quiet, pale, obedient, broken. And while they smiled over my signature, the camera recorded, the petition filed, the evidence moved, and the door they thought they had locked behind me opened from the other side. Cordelia wanted a mother erased. Bennett wanted a clean exit. Maris wanted a ready-made family wrapped in old money and fresh blankets. What they got was the truth, spoken in their own voices. People think revenge is always loud. They imagine shattered glass, screaming matches, dramatic exits in the rain. Mine was quieter than that. Mine was a pen on paper, a red light inside a flower arrangement, a lawyer with a calm voice, a judge hearing one sentence exactly as it had been said, and my sons, safe in my arms, while the Ashford name finally learned what it cost to mistake a woman's silence for surrender. They came into my hospital room 3 days after I gave birth and tried to buy my babies while my body was still bleeding. They thought $20 million was enough to make me disappear. So I disappeared, and by the time they found out where I had gone, I was no longer the wife they could corner. I was the witness. I was the mother. And I was the woman who let them sign their own downfall before they ever noticed the ink was dry. The courtroom was full that day, not with spectators, but with consequences. Lawyers, a guardian ad litem, corporate counsel sitting quietly in the back because the family case and the company scandal had started feeding each other. Bennett looked thinner. Maris was absent. Cordelia wore charcoal, no pearls. That told me she was scared. Julian called Harper first. She walked through the timeline with professional calm. The affair, the messages, the trust, the preparations, the hospital recording, the smear campaign. She did not embellish. She did not need to. Facts have their own rhythm when arranged correctly. Then my doctor testified about my condition 3 days postpartum, the risks of stress, the vulnerability of recovery, the inappropriate nature of pressuring a patient under those circumstances. The nurse testified too. She remembered Cordelia's tone. She remembered Maris standing near the bassinets. She remembered Bennett not intervening. When Cordelia took the stand, she tried to become grandmotherly. "I was concerned for the children," she said. Julian approached with 1 page in his hand. Concerned enough to offer their mother $20 million to leave them? Cordelia's jaw tightened. "That is not what I meant." "But that is what you said." "I was simplifying a complicated family matter." Julian nodded as if that answer interested him. "Mrs. Ashford, in your experience, is it common to simplify family matters by bringing your son's mistress into the hospital room of his recovering wife?" A sound moved through the courtroom. Not laughter. Something sharper. The collapse of a performance. Cordelia looked at the judge, then at Bennett, then back at Julian. For the first time since I had known her, she had nowhere elegant to stand. Julian continued, "Did you or did you not prepare a nursery in your residence before Mrs. Lockhart gave birth?" "For my grandchildren." "Did you or did you not discuss with your son the importance of establishing the children in the Ashford household due to provisions in Warren Ashford's trust?" Her attorney objected. The judge allowed a narrower question. Julian rephrased with surgical patience. Cordelia answered badly, then worse, then not at all. Bennett's turn was quieter. He admitted the affair. He admitted Maris had been present. He claimed he had not understood the legal implications of the $20 million offer. That was Bennett at his most honest, admitting ignorance only when malice became expensive. The judge issued her ruling near the end of the day. Primary custody remained with me. Bennett's visitation would continue under supervision, subject to review only after parenting evaluations and compliance with court directives. Cordelia was barred from unsupervised access indefinitely. Any attempt to interfere, contact the children through third parties, or continue public harassment would result in sanctions. The words were legal, measured, bloodless. They were also devastating. Cordelia stared straight ahead. Bennett lowered his face into his hands. Across the aisle, I sat still. I had imagined that victory might feel like fire. It did not. It felt like oxygen returning slowly to a room that had been sealed for too long. The board removed Bennett from his executive role the following Monday. They called it a leave of absence at first, then a transition, then a governance decision. Wealth has many soft names for disgrace, but everyone knew. The scandal had endangered investor confidence, and investor confidence was the one child Cordelia had always loved more than Bennett. Ashford Meridian restructured its leadership. Cordelia resigned from 2 charity boards. Her name disappeared from an upcoming hospital gala. The same women who had applauded her toast at my luncheon began sending me careful messages about strength and privacy and thinking of you. I did not answer most of them. People who clap for your humiliation rarely deserve seats at your recovery. The $20 million remained frozen until settlement discussions reopened under court supervision. In the end, every cent went into an irrevocable trust for Noah and Blair, controlled by independent trustees with strict protections. Cordelia could not touch it. Bennett could not borrow against it. Maris could not benefit from it. The money she had used as bait became a wall around my sons. That was the part I loved most. Not because of the amount. Money had never been the wound. The wound was the belief behind it, that a mother in pain could be priced, pressured, and replaced. Cordelia had measured my value in dollars and assumed I would do the same with my children. Her mistake was not underestimating my intelligence. It was underestimating my love. 6 months after the twins were born, I moved into a house near the coast in Maine. Nothing enormous. Nothing designed to impress strangers. White walls, weathered floors, a kitchen that caught morning light, and a nursery with 2 cribs by the window. Harper visited often. Julian sent fewer emails. The world, slowly, stopped feeling like a courtroom. One evening, Bennett sent a message. "Can we talk like adults? I want us to move forward." I looked at those words for a long time. Move forward. Another soft phrase people use when they want you to step over the damage they caused without making them look at it. Noah was asleep against my chest. Blair was in the crib, fighting sleep with the offended dignity of a tiny king. Outside, the ocean moved in the dark, steady and indifferent. I deleted the message. Then I opened the drawer beside my bed and took out a copy of the hospital transcript. I had not looked at it in weeks. Cordelia's sentence sat there in black ink, stripped of perfume, pearls, and power. "Take $20 million and sign it. I only want the kids." For months, people had asked me how I stayed calm. Reporters, lawyers, even Harper once, late at night over cold coffee. The truth was not noble. I stayed calm because if I had screamed, they would have called me hysterical. If I had cried, they would have called me unstable. If I had fought in that hospital room, they would have used my pain as proof that I was exactly what they said I was. So I gave them the version of me they expected. Quiet, pale, obedient, broken. And while they smiled over my signature, the camera recorded, the petition filed, the evidence moved, and the door they thought they had locked behind me opened from the other side. Cordelia wanted a mother erased. Bennett wanted a clean exit. Maris wanted a ready-made family wrapped in old money and fresh blankets. What they got was the truth, spoken in their own voices. People think revenge is always loud. They imagine shattered glass, screaming matches, dramatic exits in the rain. Mine was quieter than that. Mine was a pen on paper, a red light inside a flower arrangement, a lawyer with a calm voice, a judge hearing one sentence exactly as it had been said, and my sons safe in my arms while the Ashford name finally learned what it cost to mistake a woman's silence for surrender. They came into my hospital room 3 days after I gave birth and tried to buy my babies while my body was still bleeding. They thought $20 million was enough to make me disappear. So I disappeared. And by the time they found out where I had gone, I was no longer the wife they could corner. I was the witness. I was the mother. And I was the woman who let them sign their own downfall before they ever noticed the ink was dry. Commentary, discussion, and emotional breakdown. Let's pause here, because this story is not just about a husband cheating, a mother-in-law interfering, or a rich family trying to control everything. At the center of this story is one terrifying question. How far can people go when they stop seeing a mother as a human being and start seeing her as an obstacle? Avery was not betrayed on a random day. She was not sitting in a restaurant, arguing over marriage problems. She was not standing in a courtroom with equal strength and full preparation. She was 3 days postpartum. Her body was still recovering. Her children had just entered the world. She was physically exhausted, emotionally exposed, and medically vulnerable. And that is exactly when Cordelia chose to attack. That detail matters, because cruelty has timing. Real cruelty often waits until someone is at their weakest, then pretends the attack is practical, reasonable, or best for everyone. Cordelia did not walk into that hospital room because she was confused. She walked in because she believed Avery could not fight back. She believed a woman in pain would sign anything if the pressure was expensive enough, cold enough, and humiliating enough. And honestly, that is what makes Cordelia so disturbing as a villain. She does not behave like someone losing control. She behaves like someone executing a plan. She comes with divorce papers. She comes with the mistress. She comes with money. She comes with the line, "Take $20 million and sign it. I only want the kids." That is not just an insult. That is a whole world view in one sentence. Think about what she is really saying. She is saying Avery's body had value only until the twins were born. She is saying motherhood can be purchased. She is saying a woman's bond with her newborns is negotiable if the number is large enough. She is saying the family name matters more than the mother who almost tore herself apart bringing those babies into the world. That is why Avery's calmness hits so hard. She does not throw the folder back. She does not slap Maris. She does not scream at Bennett. And at first, that calmness might almost feel painful to watch. You want her to explode. You want her to say everything. You want her to make that room shake. But Avery understands something deeper. In that room, any loud reaction would have been used against her. That is one of the sharpest parts of the story. The villains were not only trying to remove her, they were trying to provoke her into becoming the version of herself they had already described. Unstable, exhausted, not useful, too emotional. They wanted evidence of her pain so they could rename it weakness. And that is a very familiar kind of manipulation. Some people wound you, then wait for you to bleed loudly so they can point at the blood and call you dramatic. So Avery does something colder. She lets them talk. That is where the revenge truly begins. Not when the court hears the recording, not when Bennett loses power, not when Cordelia's reputation collapses. The revenge begins the second Avery realizes that every cruel word coming out of Cordelia's mouth is becoming evidence. That tiny red light inside the flowers is more powerful than any speech Avery could have given in that moment. And let's talk about Bennett, because his silence is almost more disgusting than Cordelia's cruelty. Cordelia is openly monstrous. Maris is openly shameless. But Bennett stands by the door and lets it happen. That is a specific kind of betrayal. He does not need to shout to be guilty. He does not need to sign the papers himself to be responsible. He brings the danger into the room, then acts like he is merely witnessing a difficult conversation. He lets his mother do the violence so he can pretend his hands are clean. How many people do that in real life? They do not directly destroy you, but they stand beside the person destroying you and call themselves neutral. They let someone else humiliate you. They let someone else insult you. They let someone else make the cruel offer. Then later, when consequences arrive, they say, "I did not mean for it to go that far." But silence has fingerprints too. Bennett's silence tells Avery everything she needs to know. Not every betrayal comes with a confession. Sometimes it comes with a man looking away while his wife is being erased. And Maris, she is another kind of warning. She is not just the other woman in a simple affair story. She walks into a maternity room with a designer baby blanket, standing close to newborns that are not hers, acting like she is already part of their future. That is not love. That is entitlement dressed up as softness. She does not see Avery's babies as two fragile lives who need their mother. She sees them as the final accessories to the life she wants. That is why her line, "They'll be loved," feels so insulting. Because love is not a costume you put on after helping destroy someone else's family. Love does not walk over a bleeding mother and call itself ready. The most satisfying thing about this story is that Avery does not win through chaos. She wins through precision. She has proof. She has messages. She has the recording. She has legal preparation. She has a lawyer who understands that revenge does not need to be loud when the evidence is clean. And that is exactly what separates a powerful revenge story from a messy one. Avery does not need to become like Cordelia to defeat Cordelia. She does not lie. She does not fabricate. She does not attack the children's bond with their father for entertainment. She simply protects them from people who were willing to treat them like assets, and that is the moral weight of her revenge. It is not revenge for vanity. It is revenge as protection, revenge as boundary. Revenge as the only language predators understand when kindness has already been mistaken for permission. Now here is the question I want you to sit with. Did Cordelia ever love those babies, or did she love what those babies unlocked? Because the story makes that uncomfortable on purpose. Cordelia talks about family, legacy, structure, continuity, and the Ashford name. But when you strip away the pearls and polished language, what remains? A trust, control, access, reputation. The children are not children in her mind. They are keys. And once you understand that, Avery's response stops looking extreme and starts looking necessary. A mother does not owe politeness to people who see her children as financial instruments. Another detail I love is the $20 million itself. On the surface, it sounds like power. Cordelia thinks the number will intimidate Avery. She thinks the sheer size of it will make Avery feel small. But the money becomes the opposite. It becomes evidence of intent. It becomes the proof that the family was not offering a fair divorce. They were trying to buy separation from the mother and possession of the children. That is poetic justice. The weapon turns around in the attacker's hand, and that happens because Cordelia's arrogance is bigger than her intelligence. Smart villains hide their motives. Cordelia announces hers. She is so used to being obeyed that she forgets the world outside her mansion still has judges, medical records, recordings, custody laws, and consequences. She believes wealth can disinfect anything, but wealth cannot erase a sentence after it has been recorded. That courtroom scene works because it forces everyone to hear the truth without decoration. No pearls, no hospital flowers. No fake concern. No, we only wanted what was best for the children. Just her own voice saying, "I only want the kids." And in that moment, the entire performance collapses. That is the power of exposure. Not revenge as gossip, Not revenge as screaming online, exposure as a clean mirror. The villain has to stand in front of the exact words they used when they thought nobody important was listening. And Bennett's downfall feels earned because he loses the thing he actually worshipped: comfort. Bennett never wanted to choose. He wanted Avery's loyalty, Maris's attention, Cordelia's approval, the company position, the family money, and the public image of a decent father. He wanted every benefit without moral cost, but the story punishes him by making neutrality impossible. Once the recording plays, he cannot hide behind his mother anymore. He was there. He heard it. He allowed it. That is why Avery's line to him lands so sharply. "You were never scared of losing me until I became inconvenient to lose." That line cuts because it exposes the difference between love and possession. Bennett did not treat Avery like someone precious. He treated her like someone available. And the moment she stopped being available for harm, he called it betrayal. Let's also recognize Harper and Julian, because Avery's revenge works partly because she does not isolate herself inside shame. That is important. Betrayal often makes people go silent in the wrong way. They hide because they feel embarrassed. They blame themselves. They try to handle everything alone. Avery does the opposite. She becomes quiet publicly, but privately she builds support. She calls Harper. She hires Julian. She trusts the right people with the truth. That is not weakness. That is strategy. Avery's dignity is not in pretending she is unhurt. She is deeply hurt. Anyone would be. Her husband cheated. Her mother-in-law tried to take her newborns. Another woman stood in the room like she had already inherited Avery's life. The pain is enormous. But Avery does not let pain become confusion. She lets it become direction. That is the emotional core of the story. She is not unbreakable because nothing hurts her. She is powerful because everything hurts, and she still thinks clearly. There is something almost cinematic about that night escape from the hospital. Avery leaving with the twins, Harper driving through the wet city, Julian waiting with the legal papers already in motion. It feels like the moment the story changes temperature. Before that, Avery is trapped in a room built by other people's decisions. After that, she is moving inside her own plan. And notice the beautiful reversal. Cordelia wanted Avery to disappear. So Avery disappears, but not as a defeated woman. She disappears as a witness under protection, as a mother with evidence, as someone who has already turned the machinery of law against the people who thought they owned the machinery. By morning, Cordelia is not missing a daughter-in-law. She is missing control. That is the real revenge. Not simply that Avery gets custody, not simply that Bennett loses his job, not simply that Maris gets exposed. The real revenge is that Cordelia, who built her entire identity around control, is forced into a world where her money cannot command the outcome. Her name cannot soften the evidence. Her image cannot outtalk the recording. Her son cannot rescue her. Her cruelty has finally met a system she cannot charm. And for the audience, that feels satisfying because we have all seen people like Cordelia in some form. Maybe not billionaires, maybe not mothers-in-law with trust documents and private lawyers, but people who believe they can rewrite reality because they are louder, richer, older, more connected, or more socially polished. People who use concern as a mask. People who harm you and then ask why you are being difficult. People who expect gratitude for the smallest mercy after committing the largest betrayal. This story says, no, not this time. Avery's ending is also important because she does not become obsessed with watching them suffer forever. She moves to a quieter home. She raises her sons. She deletes Bennett's message. That deletion matters. It is not dramatic, but it is final. Sometimes the most powerful ending is not another fight. Sometimes it is refusing to reopen the door just because the person outside has finally learned how to knock softly. That is where her victory becomes complete. She does not need Bennett's apology to validate what happened. She does not need Cordelia's regret. She does not need Maris to understand the damage. Avery has the truth, her children, her safety, and her name back in her own hands. And maybe that is why the final line feels so strong. She was not the wife they could corner anymore. She was the witness. She was the mother. She was the woman who let them sign their own downfall before they noticed the ink was dry. That is revenge with intelligence. Revenge with restraint. Revenge with a pulse. So now I want to ask you, what would you have done in Avery's place? Would you have signed those papers to set the trap? Would you have stayed calm while the mistress stood near your newborns? Would you have been able to let Cordelia keep talking, knowing every word was becoming proof? And do you think Bennett deserved supervised visitation? Or did his silence in that hospital room prove he could not be trusted as a father yet? Because this story is not just asking whether Cordelia was wrong. Of course she was wrong. The deeper question is, how much betrayal can be hidden behind family language before someone finally calls it what it is? In the end, Avery's revenge works because she does not fight for ego. She fights for her children, her dignity, and the truth. She does not need to destroy people with lies. She simply lets their own words arrive in court ahead of them. And sometimes that is the most devastating revenge of all. If this story pulled you in, stay connected with Pure Drama Stories, subscribe to the channel, and come back for more emotional betrayals, hidden truths, and quiet revenge stories where the people who underestimate a wounded heart finally learn what it can do